you're Islam. Really hard spot to be in. You got to go on the road. It's your first title defense. Your coach is now not going to be with you. The crowd, a 3-1 favorite over at DraftKings. I mean, the crowd is expecting you to win. So now if you go out and beat a world champion who's never lost, who, by the way, is ranked #1 in the world pound for pound, you don't really get your credit. It was expected. That's a hard way to leave the locker room, guys. It's a hard motivation. It's a hard way to keep that focus. When the whole world is telling you this other guy's got no shot, 3-1 you. Every upset in history involves one similar ingredient. The athlete who's upset found himself in a match that was harder than he thought it was going to be. You will go into every single environment with some level of expectation. And you might really plan for a bad day. You might think that you covered your bases. But if it turns out to be harder than you thought it was going to be, it's very hard to regroup. So I'm just sharing with you from Islam's perspective. Very tough to think you're going to move on. Right? You bring a Charles Oliveira, you sit him in the front row, just by example. Well, what are you going to do with him? Charles Oliveira from Brazil just wanted to go out to Perth, Australia to watch fight? I mean, I don't put you guys as very smart guys, right? I know that I'm the professor here, but you're not that dumb. He was brought there for a reason. It's the weight class that he was just champion at. But they didn't turn to him. They didn't do anything with him. And again, I just want to go back to what Islam was up against. And just so you do understand, if Islam would have lost, do you see where there's really no need for Charles? Do you see where, oh my goodness, we got to rematch this, would come in and just make sense? There was something big on that. Do you rematch him? It was certainly competitive.
You know, what are you going to do? This is nothing new. I've been doing this for 23 years. I have no fucking idea what those guys are going to do and what they're going to say. With the judges, I mean, how do you know that? If you think you know who won what round or whatever, you're crazy. I want to bring in, you know, kids off the streets, give them a way to get off the streets, come in, train, learn how to train properly, learn how to eat properly, take the proper supplements that they need to take, and, you know, give these kids an opportunity to change them and their families' lives. That, you know, now that the UFC has become so successful and as we continue to reinvest in the sport, which is what boxing never did, this will be our third PI. Vegas, we got Shanghai, we got Mexico City, and then the next one will be in probably Abu Dhabi. And then after that, I want to focus on Africa and building one there. So this is just part of the, you know, my master plan, but it's finally happening in Mexico. And the reason is because I love and respect, you know, the history of fighting coming out of Mexico.
So with
and South America.
I guess I think if we look at the fight just from a mental perspective, I believe Adesanya had a better chance last fight. But in saying that, though, maybe now that the worst has happened again, it frees him up for the next one. You know, it can go. It can. Yeah. You can see where it can swing both ways really easily. It can either swing one way where it frees him up. The worst has happened. Whatever. And he gets in there like mentally free, or he's worried about it happening again with the small gloves because it had happened. You know,
exactly.
Yeah. That honestly, skill wise, he could have beat him skill wise last time. It was just it was a close fight, you know. Mate, that was the one thing I truly took away from that fight was just that Pereira's a freaking giant.
He's a monster.
Like, because I know, I don't think the cameras do it justice how big Adesanya is. Adesanya is a big dude, especially when he's standing face to face. Like, you're always looking up at him because he's 6'4", he's a massive guy. And then Pereira, just like his bone structures, like his hands were bigger, his feet were bigger, his head's bigger. Like,
this is kind of one of those fights, all right? and I talked about it, I said, I feel like that all the pressure's on him. He's the heavier guy. He's supposed to dominate. He's supposed to control this fight. I mean, he just finished Charles Oliveira with a submission.
Yeah.
I thought to myself too, I didn't see Volk getting out of the third round. And everyone's like, oh, how can you say that Volk's not going to get out of the third round? Or that Volk's going to go that long when he finished Charles in round 1. Because anytime you fight somebody that is like, shorter in stature, it's a lot harder to hold them down. When they push on the head to get you off of them, you're literally clearing their kneecaps by just straightening their arm. Yeah. When you're longer, when you're bigger, it's more to grab a hold of. I have the hardest time. I always had the hardest time when I would train with someone like a 125 pounder or 135 pounder, like trying to control them on bottom, because if they're good at all, they're just moving around. It's like liquid under you, just trying to grab them and get a hold of them, and they're
grabbing
constantly
water.
moving. In that first 2 rounds, even though I had Islam winning the first 2 rounds, in those first 2 rounds, you could tell the hesitation for Islam to throw and leaving himself out of position. He got nervous. He kind of like would just shell up so he didn't get hit. So he'd throw. If he missed, he'd clam up, for defense, because Volk was faster. And anytime you fight someone who's faster than you, it poses that threat of, you're blinking, you're hesitating, you're expecting to get hit. And I felt like that was a big factor, especially in those first 2 rounds. And as he started to slow down, as Islam started to slow down, in terms of the fight was progressing, and he didn't have as much pop on his step, he didn't have as much pop on his punches, all of those things, Volk started being able to touch him a little bit more. Maybe they weren't rocking him, maybe they weren't hurting him. Some of them did kind of clip him a little bit. I get concerned that because the speed was so much, it had him thinking that he was going to get hit, and it made it look worse than it was when he did get hit, because it was throwing him off balance. He seemed like he just didn't have his feet under him last night. I was texting actually Khabib during the fight too, and we were talking back and forth.
When I finished the triangle, I could see in his expression the desperation of like, fuck, I lose, I lose. It's like he saw his opportunity go away, but I just want to say to him, no. I told him, no, hey, no, stop. Like, stop that thinking that you have right now. You're a warrior. You will overcome this. You got this. So the only thing that I can say to him, you're a warrior, brother. We find the way to wake up, to stand up every time we fall into the ground, and I'm sure you will do that. So stay strong,